Welcome everyone. So this week our Torah portion is Yitro, who was Moshe's father-in-law. So as we open, we now come to see that Yitro comes to hear about all that Yahweh had done for Moshe and for all of Yisrael, or Kal Yisrael. How Adonai had brought his people out of Mitzrayim with a mighty arm. Zeroah. Now Yitro was with Moshe's spouse, Zipporah, and her two sons, Gershom, a foreigner there, because Moshe was a foreigner there, where he was in Yitro's land, and the second ben of Moshe named Eleazar. My Yahweh helps. Because Yahweh helped rescue Moshe from the sword of Pharaoh. You see, Egypt was a false god or idol in its own way, as the way of the life for the Egyptians in how they served their gods, false gods. Now, just as Moshe had been reunited to his true Abba, now so too will Moshe's sons be reunited to their father on earth. And thus we come now to when Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, sent word to Moshe that I, your father-in-law, am coming to you with your wife and her two sons. But now remember that the only reason that Moshe will be reunited with his sons is because Yahweh had protected him and kept him and his people safe and restored them. So Yikda Yahweh, let Yahweh be glorified. Now, once and for all reunited, Moshe to his father-in-law, Moshe tells Yitro of all that Yahweh did for them against Pharaoh. And what we hear next is a blessing in its own. That Yitro had rejoiced over all the good that Yahweh had done for Israel by rescuing them from Egypt. And Yitro said, Blessed be Adonai, who has rescued you from the Egyptians and from Pharaoh, who was rescued and who has rescued the people from the harsh hand of the Egyptians. Now, on top of Yitro believing in Yahweh, he also blessed him, but he now confesses it and says, Now I know that Adonai is greater than all the other gods. Now, if that wasn't enough, what he did next, he brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to Yahweh. Now, I truly ask you today, are you doing as much to and for in glorifying Yahweh as much as Yitro did? It truly makes you reflect and take a true look at yourself to see if you are truly spending time in worshiping Yahweh and Yeshua. Now remember that Yahweh knows each and every one of us, and he knows just what we need and all that we can handle are our personal thresholds. And thus, what we read next is that upon Yitro seeing how worn out Moshe was from settling all the disputes between the people of Israel and giving them guidance, now as Yitro is Moshe's father-in-law, in the place of Yahweh, Yahweh through Yitro gave advice and word to Moshe to choose from among all the people competent men who are Yahweh-fearing, honest, and incorruptible to be their leaders, in charge of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. And now, Yahweh knew Moshe's threshold and sent him help. Moshe was to receive the difficult cases, but for the ordinary ones, the leaders could handle them, such as when there is a supervisor before the manager. Now, following after Moshe's father-in-law's advice was taken and put into action, not just heard, but actually put into action, he, Yitro, returned to his own country. Now, as Moshe and the Israelites arrived in the Sinai desert, Moshe then went up to Yahweh and Adonai and called to him from the mountain and instructed him to tell the people of Israel about what Yahweh did for them and how he carried them on eagle's wings and brought them to him. See, you have to understand that with most birds, when they carry their youngs, they carry them in their talons. But with an eagle, when it has its youngs, it places them on its wings. A more soothing and careful act, because with the eagle, it flies and soars the highest of birds, and it doesn't expect anything to come from above. Come from below it. It'd have to come below and up, and nothing could come from above. So, it put it on its wings. So if it's going to get attacked, then the mother would actually be the one to get attacked first, and the babies that are on its back, or its wings, would be protected. Such as with Yahweh, how he does things for us, and he placed himself before us through Yeshua and took on our sins and the pains of the world. It's a beautiful thing to think about when you really get into it. But now, he told the children of Israel that if they would keep his covenant, that they would be a treasure from among all peoples and a kingdom of Kohanim for Yahweh, a nation that is set apart. Now, just as Moshe told the leaders of all that Yahweh said, so too did the leaders spread the words to Kal Yisrael. Now, just as Yahweh loves to hear his children respond to him as a loving father, well, as one, they all replied that everything that Adonai said, we will do. Did you hear me? We will do. Now, I know that sometimes it may seem as if we are not ready to give Yahweh all of our time, but we must strive to respond to all that he asks with everything that you have. Always remember, with Yahweh, it should always be, I will do. Now, as Yahweh heard the positive and willing response, he next told Moshe, see, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, so that the people will be able to hear when I speak to you, and also to trust in you. For how long? Yes, forever. And for us to have it, the words forever, in the Torah. So as Yahweh is wonderful and glorious and also powerful, Gavora, we see that he tells Moshe to have the people today and tomorrow to separate themselves for me by having them wash their clothes and prepare for the third day. For on that day, Adonai would come down. He would descend on Mount Sinai before all the eyes of the people to see. But now, as we follow Yeshua, so too did they have to do it right by following Yahweh's rules. And thus he told Moshe to set up boundaries that no one or thing must pass. For if they did touch the mountain, surely they would have died. Why? Well, I believe it to be that Yahweh's Shekinah would be too powerful for them to be that close to. And thus, that is why Yahweh said, you will surely die. And not only that, he gave boundaries such as with us in our lives today. We're not supposed to do certain things or tempt certain actions or tempt fate. And these are the boundaries he set for us, such as not committing suicide, keeping as we know them as the 10 Commandments. And it keeps us safe within him and safe within ourselves, actually. And that is what I believe it is. Now, as a safety warning for his creations as well, thus, it would only be accessible for them once the shofar was sounded. Now, as we come to the morning of the third day, there was thunder, lightning, and a thick cloud on the mountain. Then a shofar blast sounded so loudly that all the people in the camp trembled. Next, the people of Israel were brought by Moshe to meet Yahweh, and they stood near the base of the mountain, and Mount Sinai was enveloped in smoke, because Adonai descended onto it in fire, and its smoke went up like the smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain shook violently. As the sound of the shofar grew louder and louder, Moshe spoke, and Yahweh answered him with a voice. So next, Moshe went down to tell the people what Yahweh had said in all of the words. And thus he gave them as we know them, 10 commandments. But now, here is where the story gets very interesting. You see, what followed next was after seeing the presence of Yahweh with the lightning and the thunderings and the mountain smoking and the sound of the shofar. Now, I want to take a little moment to talk about the shofar blast. The shofar blast said that it grew louder and louder, but understand, when you blow into shofar, it starts off loud and then it gets lower. The sound dissipates because that's how the shofar is with us. But with Yahweh, you see that it said it got louder and louder and louder. So you could also see the whole miraculous act just in that alone right there, to go along with the many that he has. See, we can miss the opportunity to see so many of the blessings and miraculous acts that Yahweh put into our life. Now, with this, the Israelites were so frightened at this point that they asked Moshe to speak to Yahweh for them and to not let Yahweh speak. Not speak to them, but for Moshe instead to speak to them. And as many people today say, how come I don't hear Yahweh? Well, you do, as he speaks to us through all and anyone. For it was because we asked him not to speak to us, but instead through prophets and others, Yahweh is just respecting our request. So when people say he's silent, well, understand that, well, for one reason, he told us everything. He gave us everything through the Torah and Brit Kadash. So everything's there. I mean, if we have any questions, the answers are in there anyways. And then on top of that, we asked him not to speak to us. So he's respecting and keeping to that covenant. See, unlike us breaking covenants with him and sinning, he doesn't do that to us. So it was, like I said, it was because we asked him not to speak to us. But instead, now we get spoken through prophets and other righteous people. Though he can reach you in your dreams, never forget this. So Yahweh afterwards informs all his children to not make or have any gods of silver or gold, but instead to make an altar for him and offer up certain sacrifices to him. But us all here today can give ourselves to him, as Yeshua was the ultimate sacrifice. And we can offer him glory with worship and praise and prayer and singing songs of worship. Now, the Talmud explains that the first 2 commandments were heard and given to all Yisrael by Yahweh, but they became frightened at his presence and voice and asked to receive the rest through Moshe. Now, as for not building Yahweh an altar or having it to be cut out of hewn stone, well, understand, by the wielding of tools, well, the Mishnah states that iron was created to shorten man's life through making weapons with it and having war. But the altar was the complete opposite, as it was used to lengthen man's days. Likewise, you might be tempted to make an idol out of the cut stones. Now, it is said that Yahweh offered all the commandments to every nation in the world, starting with the biggest one first. But when they heard what was in them, they rejected them. But finally, Yahweh found a small nation of Yisrael who did accept him. And that is why they became segula, precious to Yahweh. Now, the first 5 commandments have to do with honoring Yahweh, and the last set has to do with mankind. But many people argue about how many commandments that there truly are, as the Torah never gave a totaled number. See, you can miss a lot of stuff by not looking back and constantly reading your Torah and keeping into it. Interesting. Now, for the half-Torah portion, well, it is connected to our Torah portion because just as the Israelites accepting the covenant at Sinai, well, so too does Isaiah accept the mission of prophecy and the vision given to him. Now, with our Messiah, let's say our Messianic gospel portion, we are told that if we do a good deed for a brother or sister, that we must not announce it to others and be boastful about it, as we are not to do just acts, just to be praised for them. Thus, if you donate money, let that be that. Don't go and boast about it. Now, also, when you pray to Yahweh, do not make a public portrayal of it. Do it in private, in secret, and don't offer boastful prayers to Yahweh. Be intimate with him, and don't keep babbling on to make your prayer appear as more superior. As before you asked for anything, Abba, Yahweh, already knows what you need. Thus you shall pray with the Lord's Prayer. Likewise, whenever you are wronged by someone, you should always forgive them, and also pray for them. As Yahweh forgives you, so shall you forgive others. And whenever you fast, do not advertise it, but instead keep it between you and Yahweh. Now, do not look and store up worldly items such as action figures, cars, clothing, money, and idols, but instead store up spiritual items by blessing and helping others, and also by spreading Yahweh's true gospel, and also by reading your Torah daily and observing the weekly Shabbat, as this is the way you also store up your spiritual gifts and treasures, by spending time with Yahweh. It's like you're investing into a spiritual bank account every week when you observe the Shabbat. And at the end, you have your fund, your retirement stored with you. And observing his holy feast days and his new moons. And love Yahweh and not money. Or don't be a slave to money, but instead store up faith in Yahweh instead, emunah. And never rely on yourself for things, but instead rely on Yahweh and know that he would always provide. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all things will be provided for you. So place Yahweh first in your life, and place him before in everything. Also, don't judge others, for we only have one true and just judge, Yahweh our Abba and Yeshua our Messiah. Never call someone on their sin unless you are sin-free. Take care of your sin before you give counsel to others on theirs. And treat others as you would want them to treat you. And think of others as you would want them to think of you. And always take the set-apart path and not the popular path of the world. For righteousness leads to life. But the world's popular path leads to death. Now beware of false prophets, and always test them in their ways, and examine the fruit that they bear. Does the words that they speak match the fruit that they bear? Now many say that they spend time with Yeshua and pray to him constantly and seek his guidance in all matters. But they truly don't study his Torah to know him, and they don't keep his true Sabbath, Friday sundown until Saturday sundown, and they don't observe his holy feast days or his new moon days, but they instead celebrate man-made holidays versus Yahweh's holy days. See, they're two totally different things. That's what they choose to do instead, or continue to do. And they also keep a Sunday Sabbath rather than his true Sabbath. nor do they observe his new moon feast. It is them that truly do not know Yeshua, and that Yeshua would say, I know you not. Remember to seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all things shall be added to you. And now we will have the Aaronic blessing. May Adonai bless you and keep you. May Adonai cause his face to shine upon you, be gracious to you. May Adonai lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. This has been a weekly Messianic Torah portion from Following Yeshua Ministries. For more information or for guidance, please visit followYeshuaNow.com.